Welcome to the official Youth Link podcast, A Wee Piece. We're very excited to have our guest with us today, Kate Laverty, Director of Forthspring, and we're going to chat a little bit about the work Kate does, and especially around the idea of non-violence. So, Kate, thanks for coming. What inspired you to begin working with young people and communities in Northern Ireland?
So my path into youth work wasn't by grand design in any way. I'm one of those people who were born old. So I have quite old-fashioned values, like hard work, personal responsibility, respect for elders, strong family ties, being modest, honest, civility, and things like this. But I think at the kind of the cornerstone of old-fashioned values and at the root of it all is the centrality of community. And so in many ways, I suppose I got involved in youth and community work by proximity. I was raised in a community where the rhythm of conflict hummed beneath the kind of everyday life, and where hope was something that you had to cultivate. It wasn't just something you inherited. There was no one rooting for you, essentially. So into my late teens and early 20s, I found myself returning again and again to spaces where young people gathered. And I think for me, being old before my time, I was kind of seeking out the quiet beats between anger and the potential of those young people. So in many ways, it was like, tending a garden where you recognise promise in areas where maybe others saw weeds. And so I learned to wait, to water gently, to kind of nourish something that probably couldn't even name itself. So the long story short is I got into it by being older than my time and by being near young people.
Do you mind me asking, when you say older in your time, what sort of age did you start getting involved in these communities?
18. I was a youth worker at the age of 18,
yeah.
I know.
Wow.
And that was and that was coming from, I went to St. Louise's. I'm from Divis. I went to St. Louise's, and at that stage people just expected me to be going to university, and I'd been accepted at Cambridge to read Egyptology, and I realised that that's not what I wanted to do, because being near young people was where I felt my heart was calling me, a vocation was calling me, and I, again, speaking to the strong family ties, I realised I would miss my mummy's cooking too much. So I stayed home. I just went to Queen's instead.
Wow, thanks for sharing that. I didn't know that. I'm glad there's people like you with the heart that you have, So you talked also a little bit about small beats between the violence and the rhythm of violence. What problems do you think that young people face the most today in this divided society?
So our young people face the legacy of trauma, economic hardship, a fractured civic narrative as well, and social media amplifies that division. Many struggle to find belonging in a way that isn't defined in opposition to someone else, which is sad. But it's sad because they can't say I am. They have to say they are, so I am. And that's heartbreaking for me. And like Bell Hooks wrote, belonging is the innate human desire to be part of something bigger than ourselves. And I think that for young people in divided communities, the desire is real, but it's very often unmet. So they need spaces where they can move beyond these inherited scripts and imagine new compositions of identity, justice, peace. Like in the garden. So in Forthspring we have a big garden. I love it. Again, that's the old-fashioned.
I've seen it too. It's lovely.
Yes, isn't it? Thank you.
Yeah.
But we talk about companion planting, right? And so that's where plants grow better when they are supported by other plants. But our young people need those companions as well. They need relational environments where it's safe to grow, to stretch, to root into something new. And if you're living at the kind of cold face, peace wall of a divided community, it's harder to find those companions. So it's harder to grow.
Yeah. If you want to continue with the garden analogy, you could say there's a couple of wallflowers, that are only using the wall to define themselves and to grow, and it's still part of their identity. So yeah, Forthspring itself is on the interface between Falls and Shankill.
Yes, the peace wall runs through our building.
And our doors open at either side.
We used to have that. We don't presently because Innovation Factory cut off our back door. So members of the community who would live on the Shankill roadside of the Peace Wall can come to us through Workman Avenue.
It's really nice, like imagery, and even the building itself is great. So yeah, thank you for doing that work. I know in Forthspring, as well as the garden, you do a lot of work on non-violence. So what does non-violence look like to you in Northern Ireland, especially when we're talking about reconstituting relationships and new identities? So how does non-violence play a role in all of that?
This is something I reflect on every month with Innate. It's a non-violence newsletter because it's a big question and I've yet to come to a conclusive answer. So I apologise now. When I start to ramble, just cut through me with a new question.
No, not at all.
So non-violence to me is an action of the heart. It has to be, because sometimes we won't see the fruits of our non-violent actions. It's not silence. It is disciplined creative disruption. It's an act of choosing transformation over retaliation. And you ask about this place. So non-violence in this place requires imagination. You have to be daring enough to choose community over retribution, dignity over dominance, and relationships over fear. And relationships only develop at the speed of trust. And where trust is perpetually eroded or undermined or fragmented, then you have to go back to the start and rebuild those relationships. And it's non-violence isn't a refusal to act. A lot of people have accused us of that. It's a deeper commitment to transformation, even in the face of provocation. It's about being resilient, insistent, and refusing to mimic the violence that we're seeking to replace. For me, and I'll do the gardening analogy, since we've started, sure, we'll keep going there. A peace builder, I suppose, has to see what isn't yet visible. And so for us, non-violence is planting bulbs in the autumn and trusting that something beautiful will rise in the spring. And sometimes that does mean that you'll never actually see it bloom yourself. In our context, in Forthspring, we were born from 4 faith communities. While we're a secular organisation now, non-violence in Northern Ireland, I feel, does carry a spiritual weight. Faith communities, where they are at their best, have modelled what it means to be peace builders, rooted in conviction and compassion. But faith for many here has been both the balm and the wound, But our best traditions call us to be instruments of peace, as St. Francis wrote. So in Northern Ireland, for me, non-violence also means challenging not just the systems that harm, but the stories that justify that system. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it's interesting you touched on that point, because the last podcast we had was Jo Berry, and we got to talk to Jo about peace and reconciliation, and she is a very powerful speaker, but one of the things that we talked about was the difference between justice and justification. And so, like, there are them stories and always reasons why, and I guess they're kind of built into identities in Northern Ireland, which is really, really... Do you get much... Sorry, this is a question off the script. Do you get much pushback or blowback in saying you're trying to reimagine a new identity for the young people in non-violence, rather than taking their identity at the minute and helping it blossom toward non-violence?
No, the biggest pushback I get is by being called soft. I'd love to see anyone who is very soft doing non-violence work. It's not easy. Unimaginative. I get called... Folks have said that in practicing non-violence, that I am perhaps not resisting the challenges in society in the way they would expect me to. But I think that comes back to the old-fashioned values I referenced. It's that sense of civility and personal responsibility, and seeking to inculcate that with our young people, because when you do, they'll create their own identities, they'll forge their own notions of self. And I would hope, please God, that then is in relation only to themselves, not in relation to the perceived other. But no, the accusations tend to come from what you're doing is, futile and very delicate and soft in a community that's not very delicate and soft.
Oh, I'm sorry you've got those accusations. I mean, just when you're talking about what non-violence is, I thought it was very interesting and insightful that you see it as an action. Non-violence is an action, and it is not easy. So thanks for sharing that insight. Was there a particular moment or experience that made you very committed to non-violence?
Yes, thank you for asking. So I'm a survivor of intentional violence to my person, and I remember the instinct to retreat the confusion and the ache of not understanding why it was done to me. I was taught to forgive, and I was raised to choose peace, not because it was easy, but because it freed us. And Buddhists teach that if you are carrying anger is like a hot coal. When carrying it, it only hurts you. And certainly that's what I would have been taught. I don't know what drove that will to harm me, but I did know that I did not want to carry my response to it forward. And I don't know if the person wanted forgiveness or even sought to repent. Like, non-violence is about being willing to kind of, suffer for the cause, to go that step further. And I think in Mozart's Don Giovanni, for example, the title character is very arrogant, violent, impulsive. But in the end, there's the supernatural figure appears and offers him one last chance to repent. And Don Giovanni refuses. And I remember the first time watching that opera and thinking, totally feeling these chills up my spine, because it was a reminder to me that peace and redemption were always offered, but they weren't always taken. So I don't know if the person who harmed me wanted redemption, but I offered forgiveness in my heart to them anyway. And then we'll go with the garden. Don't know why I started, so we'll just stay there. It's a lovely space. But like when you're in the garden, what looks dead above the surface might be healing below. And I can only afford that person who harmed me that grace. They might have been in a different stage of healing. And non-violence is trusting that I suppose it's in trusting that unseen transformation below the ground. So I had to trust that the person did not act from a malicious place. And I think for me then, I became committed to kind of composting what I can't control and then letting time, care and grace do the rest of the work. And it has served me well, I can't complain. So you ask about, commitment to non-violence. I didn't know that language at the time. I'm talking to you now about it, but I began to appreciate through the study of Kingian non-violence what it was I was trying to do. And that's what we teach in St. Peter's Immaculata Youth Centre. I volunteer there. It's an amazing youth centre. And there are 6 tenets to Kingian non-violence. Non-violence is a way of life for courageous people. It seeks to win friendship and understanding. It seeks to defeat injustice, not people. It holds that suffering can educate and transform. Mine did for me. It chooses love instead of hate. I hope I do. It believes that the universe is on the side of justice. I feel it is. And so those principles echoed through my work in St. Peter's and now I hope in Forthspring. We're not here as youth workers, as you know yourself, to control behaviour. We're here to transform conditions, to offer presence instead of punishment, and to create, as Dr. King said, a beloved community. And I can think of nothing better when you have a peace wall and bitterness and hatred reinforcing that peace wall, that you build a beloved community from non-violence.
Thank you for sharing that, and it's an amazing view and worldview you've got from it, and it's very impressive that you've committed to it and stuck with it. But I take it as years of practice as well. Yeah, so far years of practice as well. So yeah, when we talk about non-violence, how do you get young people bought into it? If we're going to focus on the action, how do you sell it to young people? Violence seems a bit more fun sometimes for young people.
Sell a sizzle, not the bacon, isn't that what they say? So for me, we've never demanded buy-in to non-violence, so I suppose I first practiced this in St. Peter's Immaculata Youth Centre. We invite it, we model it, we show our young people that non-violence is strength. So young people aren't naive, they know power when they see it as well, and non-violence, when it's embodied with integrity, is power. And if you embody it well and with integrity, then they will recognise what drives your power as a youth worker then. For me, non-violence is the kind of, the baseline that holds the rhythm steady, even if the melody falters. As you would do in your youth work practice, I do in mine. I let our young people lead. We walk with them when it's hard. But it's about relationships. All youth work is. When they know they're seen, they see themselves differently too. We recently wrote a report in St. Peter's with the Open University on the Why Riot programme. And The Why Riot programme was developed by the ACT Initiative. The research was launched in Shankill Women's Centre earlier this month, and there's a plethora of reasons why our young people chose to riot, or to be at the epicentre of that rioting. And it was everything from poverty to policing, from FOMO to feeling unloved. And I read that answer and wept. When you understand the why, you can begin to craft healing experiences for those children and young people so as to mitigate the motivation to violence. The idea isn't new. It is rooted in faith traditions as well. In Islam, the Prophet Muhammad said, the strong person is not the one who overcomes people by his strength, but the one who controls himself while in anger. For us, true strength is self-mastery, not domination. And I suppose that's the essence of non-violence, not weakness, but power under control. And in Forthspring, we teach non-violence by living it, by respecting the power of our young people, and by showing them that being seen and being strong are not opposites. They're actually part of the same story. So, long story short, we don't demand buy-in. We live it and hope they want to model it as well.
And offer that space for it to have a positive impact on them and that them relationships.
That's what I meant to say, yes.
No, that's what you did say. Sorry, I was just checking my understanding. Have you ever, has there been a time where you've seen a young person make a choice of non-violence when in a situation before they may have chosen a different alternative?
Yes. And the thing is, right, they're not paradigm shifting moments for anyone except the young person who made the choice. The rest of us are just observers. It gladdens my heart. You see it happen and you get this little kick out of, oh my gosh, yay. For me, they've done the right thing. I hope they feel they've done the right thing for themselves. But to everyone else, they'll just have seen that a child either did or did not take a particular action, and there'll be no cognizance given to the drive, the motivation behind that child actually taking that choice in that moment. And I suppose we see this in literature. If you think about To Kill a Mockingbird, Atticus comes out and faces the lynch mob outside the jailhouse. But he doesn't raise his voice or his fists. He just stands. And then Scout, without actually realising the danger, just kind of speaks to, Mr. Cunningham. And he has this childlike honesty, and that simple human moment breaks the tension. And sometimes it's simple things like that. And unless you are deeply emotionally invested in a young person's story, you're not going to see the action that the child took. But one of the big ways that our children and young people have impressed me by their non-violent action, if you take the ongoing Holocaust in Gaza, I had the terrifying and humbling privilege of visiting the Beach refugee camp. It's the third largest refugee camp in Gaza in 2024. And I was there to deliver a mobile maternity unit. And that was funded by youths from across the city. They did 24-hour fasts, they did spin-a-thons, they did marathons. But these were acts of fundraising that were acts of non-violence against acts of state injustice to a colonised people. That's non-violent action, but no one's going to see that as non-violent action.
That's amazing. They're
so powerful.
Amazing story.
The kids are amazing. Our young people are so inspiring.
Yeah, that's a really inspiring story. Do many people know about that story?
I don't know. They will when they listen to this.
Yeah. Well, I just wish more stories like that or choices of non-violence could be more visible. I think you talked about young people living in the social media sphere. I think social media is way better at stirring up violence and hate than it is at non-violence and seeking justice or committing to justice. So, related to that, you've been in youth work for a while. 20 years. Which has also been the big onslaught of social media wave. Do you think that the attitudes of young people have changed from when you started to where they are now?
Yes. Absolutely.
Is it fair to do one brush stroke of all young people saying they're all...
I think you can see social trends, you can, but it's not fair ever to kind of, I suppose, do a brush stroke across all of our young people. But you'll know yourself from your youth work that you do see patterns of behaviour, and you see little tribes of young people emerging, and the same little tribes emerge and re-emerge. So I think for me, yeah, I've seen openness among young people that would have been unthinkable 20 years ago. the cross-community friendships, the shared creative spaces, and honest conversations about identity and justice that actually have probably been enabled by social media. Our children in Forthspring, for example, will run about in Celtic and Rangers t-shirts, and they'll mingle like a two-part harmony, and nobody will bat an eyelid. But lately, and by lately I mean within the last month, you've heard that dissonance begin to creep back in. There's disinformation, there's division, and there's disinvestment. And they've really started to compromise the social contract that has held us together post-agreement. So what I'm seeing impacting my young people, political instability, economic pressure, and a sense of institutional failure, my young people are beginning to feel very cynical about peace and about the future as a result. So in protests across the region this month, children were weaponised instead of protected. And for me, that means we risk teaching them that violence is their only verse. And that's a dereliction of adult responsibility, in my personal opinion. The attack last week on Belfast Islamic Centre, for example, wasn't an act of hate. It was a rupture of the social rhythm that we have tried so hard to keep. In Forthspring, we're proud to stand in solidarity with our Muslim brothers and sisters. BMCA use our space each Friday to make prayers. And on Monday at our staff debrief, staff ask, were we taking additional security measures this Friday in case we were the subject of attack? I don't think I've ever been asked that question. So our young people will feel that as well. But the kind of disinvestment that I referenced, I suppose, is the lack of investment in detached youth workers. And we'd have this conversation repeatedly, but there are those of us who, I suppose, walk the margins, who are the last line of relational trust. But it means that the kind of music of non-violence, and silence is a crucial part of music. It holds the beats together, but and in that silence is power. But we do then kind of hear that music of non-violence being drowned out at an interface. Like this week, Saturday night, I took knives and metal bars out of the hands of children and young people who 3 nights previously were racing bikes up and down the same street with the people against whom they were facing off on Saturday night. And so those, if I'm not there, if that support isn't there for young people in those high pressure moments at those interface points, then we'll see young people hit the wrong note. Not because they kind of set out to do so, but because they've no sheet music, and essentially they've no conductor to kind of help them compose a quieter way of responding either. So, and that goes for any detached youth worker who's trying to do as much as they can of an evening. But we're not the 4th emergency service. I've said that more than once. So I don't know. There is still a role for us as youth workers to try and help them craft a new song where the chorus is more about social justice, peace and reconciliation. But I think even in saying that sounds very restrained. Peace isn't a lullaby, it's a battle drum. But there is still a role for youth workers to help young people recognise how to make safe choices. That hasn't changed in 20 years.
With the recent events that you mentioned, like what was that event on Saturday night in the Shankill with the young people, the Belfast Islamic Centre attack, the riots that happened recently, and this all happened in the space of a month, if even. I think it's got many people demoralised. And how do you think that impacts you or youth workers generally? Does it feel like, because for me, I'll just share my story of on Friday night there, I just wrapped up a shared agenda for peace project, and I was working with Friends of Africa and Anaka, and I was working with mainly Muslim young people, refugees and asylum seekers, and we had a great day. It was a big party, it was a big celebration, and they felt seen and heard, and it was a big community event. And then less than 2 hours later, that attack on the Islamic Centre happened. So after that, after you probably should have been riding a high and feeling good about the youth work I've done, I just felt demoralised and feel like I'm facing an uphill battle all the time in shifting attitudes. Do you think the past month of what we've seen has demoralised youth workers, or has demoralised the dream of non-violence? Or is that just, are we panicking too much, we're jumping the gun and reading the trends, and we should have faith in the longer term youth work process in Northern Ireland?
Well, firstly, thank you for all of your youth work in not quite 20 years yet.
6, I've done 6 years now.
Yeah, And I'm sorry that you didn't get to ride that high, because so often in youth work we live for those days. We live for the celebration of seeing our young people evolve through the project. So I hope that in time you do get to celebrate the wins that you've undoubtedly had in that project. And thank you for hosting it and for what you've brought to youth work. I've heard you say that, you know, you feel now like it's an uphill battle, and I hope that it's one you've the energy to kind of get over, because it is just a hill. It's just a small hill. And in, you know, the rest of your youth work career, you're going to have lots of those hills, and just keep going. Find mentors who will help you get over those hills, and I'm always here. There'll always be someone to kind of help you. No, I mean that though, because the thing is that if you look at it in this month, has our response been proportionate as youth workers? Absolutely. Is it part of a longer term narrative? I don't think so. I think the longer term narrative, and I personally believe obviously that the universe is on the side of justice, and also that we are trending towards peace. But like any good trend line, you know, there are going to be little blips, and I think that's what this is. And with the right investment from youth workers, from community, and from faith leaders as well, we will see peace come back onto our agenda in a very powerful way because of the work that people like you do.
And yourself. Thank you. Okay, last question. Okay. Let's leave a note of inspiration and advice, insight, for people who can't get to meet you like I can, you know. What are some things you learned in trying to inspire non-violence with young people that other youth and community workers could take with them?
So, start where you are, not where you want them to be. Sorry, start where they are, not where you want them to be. Non-violence isn't taught from a platform. It is cultivated in conversation. Honour their anger as well, because it's usually grief in disguise. You can't ask a young person to choose peace if they don't feel safe and seen and valued. I will say that the most effective interventions, as you know yourself, is just being there consistently, and that consistent presence means that a young person begins to trust you. It's not in policies, it's not in programs, and it's certainly not in 10-year-long strategies. It is in the 10-minute conversations of a night. Use music, art, story as bridges, whatever it takes. The shortest distance between two people is a story, and creating that sense of empathy will get you there a whole lot quicker than any 4-part diagram ever will. Non-violence isn't a doctrine you deliver. It has to be a rhythm you live, and you have to kind of lean into the groove. It might take a while. It isn't soft. It isn't safe, and it has to be chosen daily in the moments where everything you want to do is fight back with aggression. You have to fight back with love. Non-violence also must be framed as power, not as passivity. Young people won't buy into something that feels weak. So show them that non-violence is actually a form of very defiant love, and they listen, they'll watch, and some will follow. Listen louder than you speak. Sometimes not reacting is an act of resistance, and you know, I've talked about the power of silence. I've talked about the power of just holding space. Build the support system before the crisis. So without relationships, with mentors, with youth workers, then young people can be left vulnerable in split-second decisions. So detached youth work, peer support, and being present at flashpoints isn't just helpful, it is essential. And I suppose that's what we try to do at Forthspring. We don't have a perfect piece in my centre, but we have a chorus. I have an amazing staff team and a fantastic volunteer team and brilliant, insightful children's minds. We've a chorus of very brave, flawed and committed voices that I have the privilege of listening to every day. So I suppose the only thing I would say around non-violence is listen to your young people and go with them.
The shortest bridge between two people is a story?
It is.
That's amazing. I've never heard that before. Right, thank you very much, Kate. Hopefully that was very insightful for you all, and that's the end of the episode.